So this has come up time and time again with clients and also questions in speaking events. So I wanted to share some tips, tools, and strategies with you so you can be highly influential and not be perceived as a threat. So you can have the biggest voice, the biggest impact for yourself, for your manager, and for the organization. This is going to be a multi-part series, 4 parts to be exact. And today we're going to start with empathy. I call it strategic empathy. This really helps in trust building. A lot of times when we're trying to establish ourselves, let's say we are in a new role, or if we are established in a role but we have new leadership, it's incredibly important to establish what I call strategic empathy. So we communicate that we care about the other person, not that just that we care about them as a human being, but that we care about what's important to them. And so, one way that's an incredibly important way to prepare for interactions with them so that you can build the bedrock of influence without being perceived as a threat is to plan as if you're them. So, empathy is not about wondering what it's like to be them. It's actually taking on their persona. And it's a very powerful way to plan for meetings. And so just ask yourself prior to interactions questions such as, I am so and so, whoever your boss, your manager is. What is important to me? What is at risk for me? Who is putting pressure on me? What am I afraid of losing? What would be most helpful to me? So, really plan, step outside of yourself and into the other person and build strategic empathy. And by doing this, it also helps prepare your mindset. If you have been following me for a while, you always know that I say whatever we're thinking comes out of our mouth. So even if it's someone who perhaps you don't get along with, or perhaps you don't admire as a leader, or you're a lot of times people wonder, well, why do I need to do that for them? It's especially important to do that with leaders or managers who have been difficult to make progress with. The reason being is what we're thinking comes out of our mouth. And in order for us to frame up a highly influential conversation, we need to build the runway or the bedrock of trust. And how we build that trust. And it's not just, I'm not really talking about trust as it has to do with, do they trust that we'll get the job done? It really has to do about, do they trust that you have their best interest at heart? And that is really going to be the runway prior to influence. And the one mistake that many, many leaders can tend to make, especially women, because women have had to fight so hard to get where they are, that sometimes they lead with what they can do. They lead with the impact that they've had. They lead with the ideas that they have, which and also their track record, which is so, so important. But it's vital to connect with the other person first and lead with strategic empathy first. And they will be much more, the other person or your manager will be much more willing to take into what you have to say if we can connect with them first and establish that trust. So number one is developing what I call strategic empathy. And that has to do with, like I said, asking yourself a couple simple questions as if you're your manager. So it could be, the first one is, what's most important to me? One question that's incredibly important is, what am I afraid of losing? Because that is going to be a barrier to having influence if we don't know that information. And then finally, another question would be, what would make this quarter or year end a 10 plus for me? And asking that as your manager. Okay. And so once you have some knowledge about that information, you really thought it through. If you take on someone else's persona, You can't help but care about them because you are them, if that makes any sense. So be sure to build strategic empathy, ask those questions, prepare for your next meeting as if you're that person. And this strategic empathy will help lay the foundation to structuring the communication so you can have your biggest impact and influence with your manager or boss without being perceived as a threat. So I encourage you to think about those questions and to plan that out. Next time, we're going to talk about curiosity, building curiosity about the condition of the other person so you can make progress. And then we'll wrap up the series with actually structuring your communication so you can build influence without being a threat. So here's to you being as influential and impactful as possible. Keep up all of your amazing work. I am cheering you on from San Diego, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.